For the next few weeks, we'll be working with Microsoft Excel. This week focuses on some of the basics of Excel and some tips and tricks on how to make your life a little easier when you work with Excel. But before we get started, let's discuss why learning Excel is so important. Regardless of what your major is, Excel is kind of that Swiss Army knife of personal computing for businesses. It's a skill that consistently comes up as necessary for college graduates. While I will be covering a lot of the basics of Excel and some advanced functions in our last week of Excel, there's plenty more to learn. So take the time to educate yourself outside of this course because it really is that important and will set you apart from others when you go to apply for a job. There are two different skills for Excel users to learn. First, it's the data entry, the formulas, functions, and logic associated with data analysis in Excel. But second is creating the user interface so it's easy for someone else to pick up your work and understand what you've done in Excel. So let's talk about some basic terminology in Excel. First, we have the word spreadsheet, which is a way to organize the data into rows and columns, and it allows you to perform mathematical calculations. Worksheets are a single spreadsheet, and they contain cells organized by rows and columns. A workbook is a bunch of worksheets put together. Think about it like a book. A bunch of sheets make a book. Columns are vertical and are named by letters. So we have column A, B, C, etc. Rows are horizontal and are labeled by numbers. So we have row 1, 2, 3, etc. A cell is a single box within a worksheet. So it's where a row and a column intersect and where we can put in information such as data, formulas, text, and much more. So we can have cell A1 or cell F456. An active cell is the cell that you're currently working in, which is usually highlighted in Excel. And lastly, we have a range of cells, which is a group of cells that are connected to one another. So here's what Excel looks like, and where you'll see some of the main parts of Excel. Notice that the rows and columns are labeled across the top and down the left-hand side. We also have worksheets that are labeled with little tabs at the bottom, and the active cell is highlighted with a little green outlined box in this example. Now, before we get started with the rest of this week's lecture, please be sure to download the class activities workbook for this lecture. Save the file somewhere on your computer and work through it and try some of the different features that we'll be discussing. Be sure to save your document as you follow along because this is what you'll be turning in for this week's class activity. Now, feel free to pause the video that you're watching right now while you go through the activities and then come back and press play again. Let's start with just entering in some data. The first thing I want you to do is open the original worksheet and enter in the data that is boxed in red on this slide. Now, if your spreadsheet looks a little cut off and you can't read all the text, here's a little tip. Double-click between the column lines. So between the A and B or between the B and C, depending on where you want to extend the text. You should see that the cells expand and allow you to see all of the text in those cells. Excel allows you to format text and numbers in certain ways so that way you can identify currency, dates, times, percentages, and much more. So let's change some of the cells to currency. Select the range that you want to change, and for our example, select C3 and drag it down to C20. You should see a little highlighted box like the image shows you on this slide, and use the Format Cells feature to convert them into currency. Now let's say we have to add a row or a column or delete a row or a column. As you work with data, you'll need to make changes. So there are two ways to do this. First, you can use the Home tab and go to the Cells group to find the Insert or Delete function. Or you can right-click on the selection of cells and pick Insert or Delete from the menu to decide what you need. Let's try it out. I want you to delete the additional revenue row. You can do this by clicking on row 4 and then right-clicking on row 4, and you should see a delete option. When you click on that, notice that it deletes that entire row. Now let's say you have a really large data set that you're working with. Finding information in such a large data set can be difficult and time-consuming, but filters in Excel allow us to narrow down the data set in our worksheet. Let's give it a try. Open up the Filter Example worksheet. You'll see the little tab at the bottom of the workbook that says Filter Example to get to this worksheet. It should look something like this image. Click on one of the headings. You can click on county, state, anything that's across the top. And click on the little filter funnel icon, which can be found in the Data tab. Now, let's say we only want to look at the data in this data set for California. Notice there are little arrows on the headings that are in row 1. Click on the little arrow below State and select only California. You may need to unselect the Select All option and select only California. Now, you should only see the data for California. The nice thing about filters is that it doesn't delete any of your other data. It just makes it easier for you to see only what you're interested in. Now let's try filtering just a little bit more. Say we're only interested in Los Angeles County. Leave the filter that you have for California still there and go ahead and filter down only to Los Angeles. When you do this, you'll notice that you only have one row, and that's for Los Angeles County. You can also easily clear all of the filters to get back to your original data set by clicking on the little icons for the filter and selecting Clear Filter. This will bring you back to the original data set. Now let's say you're working with a lot of data like the worksheet we were just in. If you scroll down, you'll notice that your headings disappear, and it can be hard to figure out exactly what numbers you're looking at and what the data means when you don't have that heading row up top. So Excel allows us to freeze certain lines. This is in the View tab in the Window group, and there's a button called Freeze Panes. All right, let's give that a try. Let's go back to the filter example. Click on Freeze Top Row option in Freeze Panes. Now try scrolling up and down in your worksheet and you'll notice that the headers are still there and you can easily identify what data you're looking at. You can also unfreeze the panes if you decide you don't need them. It's important to note that you can do this for more than just that top row. You can compare different rows or columns to one another by selecting the row below or the column to the right of where you want it to freeze. Here's a quick little tip for working with Excel. On the left-hand corner to the left of the A column and above the first row, you'll notice this little gray icon with the triangle in it. This is the Select All button. You can use this to generally change formatting of your worksheets. When you click on it, it will highlight all of the cells in your spreadsheet. Let's give it a try. Change the font on the original worksheet to Comic Sans and font size 10. Your worksheet should look like the image that's displayed. Now let's change just cell A2 where it says revenue in 2016 to be Arial, font size 14, and let's make it bold and italicized. Now remember that format painter that we discussed in Microsoft Word? It's also available in Excel. So let's use it to match all of the headings in column A to match the formatting in A2. To do this, select cell A2, click on the Format Painter icon, and click on column A. Notice that all of the headings in column A change to match A2. All right, now let's discuss formatting. Remember that this is the second part of using Excel. We want the user interface to look nice. And we can use borders, shading, colors, fonts, and so much more, just like we were able to do in PowerPoint and Word. Borders allow us to outline a cell or several cells, and we can right-click on those cells and click on Format Cells or use the border icon to do that. Here's all of the different options that are available for borders. So you can have the border just to the left or to the right or on top or underneath. You can change the colors. There are lots of different options for us. Sometimes when we have too much text in one cell, it can spill over to another cell. But we can wrap the text to make it go around. And so wrap text is also available in Format Cells to make that change. Excel has built-in styles specifically for cells that you can apply or modify or even create your own if you want to highlight a particular cell within your document. There are also built-in styles for entire tables. So let's give this a try. Go back to that original worksheet and try changing the look of your table and using one of the built-in styles. The last basic feature of Excel that we'll focus on this week is how to create graphs and charts. When we have tons of data, it can be really helpful to have all of those numbers and information, but visualizing that data through charts can help us communicate the data. It allows us to be effective, efficient, accurate, and convey data in very little time. However, when we use graphs and charts, we have to be careful. We don't want to misrepresent relationships, trends, or patterns. We want to provide the correct amount of information and not overuse them. Ensuring accuracy is really key when using any type of chart or graph. And there are a lot of different types of charts that we can use in Excel. So let's talk about a few of these. You can pick a chart by selecting your data within your worksheet and going to the Insert tab and the Charts group. You'll be able to add all of the major parts of a chart, such as a title, a legend, and axis. Excel also uses the terminology data series to refer to the values that are actually being charted and source data for the range of cells that make up a chart. Chart elements include where you can change the basic look of your chart by adding titles, labels, values, legends, and changing their location. So we have column charts where we use vertical columns to compare data. A cluster column can be used to include more than one category, and the legend allows us to distinguish what each of those categories mean. We also have stack bars or columns to show the proportion of two variables over time. This is kind of a combination between a bar or column chart and a pie chart, but it can get very complicated very quickly. So let's try a very simple column chart. Go to the column chart worksheet and highlight the data in the worksheet. And for this example, highlight the county and the percentage of uninsured. and then create a column chart by inserting that chart. Be sure to add a title, access titles, remove the legend, and add data values using the data elements features. This is what your column chart should look like when it's completed. We can also do bar charts where the column chart is rotated 90 degrees. It's great to use when you need the extra space for longer descriptions. We also have line charts that we can use to relate data that's taken over time, and pie charts to illustrate the relative proportions between the various components of something. Remember that the slices of a pie chart must add up to 100%. Let's try a pie chart. Let's go to the pie chart worksheet and create the pie chart using the data that's available. Be sure to include the correct labels and titles, and try changing out some of the colors and lines. Here's an example of what your pie chart could look like. The last few types of charts that you may see include an area chart where we can represent totals using numbers of percentages over time. We can also create scatter charts to demonstrate relationships and show trends in data. And there are plenty more types of charts that can be used, but they're not as commonly used as the ones that we just discussed. Now that's it for the first week of Excel. I hope you learned some new tricks, and we'll start working through more of Excel in the next couple weeks.